thanks to Mike, and now we get to enjoy poems by Kristy. It's going to be fantastic. I just wanted to say, again, thanks to Malvern. So we can give Malvern a round of applause. Please do support them by buying every book in this establishment. You don't have to just buy Kristy's. You can buy the other ones too, but probably Kristy's first, otherwise it'll be awkward. I'm really just happy to be here and be able to introduce her, because there's something really amazing about a book launch. It's like the culmination of a lot of suffering in a way, and like pain and like sweat going into creating this wonderful thing that then you sort of, by publishing it, you can sort of divest yourself of that problem once and for all, right? And I think it's especially wonderful because I've known Kristy for a long time. We met back at Texas State many years ago when we were younger and wiser, before it all went to hell. But I think it's really fantastic, and just watching her development as a poet from writing back then to this beautiful book, which is a meditation on this kind of release from dealing with grief, dealing with problems, and coming to some sort of greater realization and greater awakening. And I think the journey that takes place in the book is beautiful in and of itself. Sort of as a publisher, I think it's really great, and I'm really privileged because Atmosphere, we're putting out books this year by people who live in Sweden and Australia and Canada, and Kristy is actually our first Austin poet who we're putting out. So I'm really happy that she's the first. So Kristy Peloquin is a poet, of course, memoirist, teacher, and writing group leader in Austin. She graduated from Texas State with a BA and MFA. She's a teacher at ACC and co-leads therapeutic creative writing workshops for persons suffering through grief and loss. She is currently at work on a memoir about her life growing up in rural central Texas, separating from a religious sect and surviving trauma. I'm glad to introduce her and her book, Adrift. Thank you.
I have to move that because I'm not that kind of girl. I will knock that over pretty quickly. So, thank you guys so much for showing up tonight. I really appreciate seeing all of your faces, and knowing that some of you drove a really long way to be here really warms my heart. And thank you, Malvern Books, for having me. I really appreciate that as well. And yeah, like Nick said, please buy everything. Buy all the stuff. We have to support our independent bookstores. We just have to. So, this is my book, Adrift. Adrift is a kind of meditation on trauma. I guess I feel like in our society, on the one hand, we say to people that have gone through traumas, we say, that's really tough. I'm really sorry to hear that you went through that thing. And then on the other hand, we're like, why aren't you normal? And that thinking really frustrates the hell out of me. And so that's part of what I wanted to address in this book. And so in the first section, there's 3 sections. The first section, called Fray, is kind of like suffering at the individual level, in the home, right? So it deals with things like broken homes, trauma from childhood stuff, and my stories, as well as stories that I've collected as I've gone through life, and I've heard other people's stories and they've really impacted me. The second section is called Fumed, and that is about the socio-political world, which I feel like is equally triggering these days. It's equally traumatic. It is re-triggering for people that have been through trauma to hear some of the stuff that's in the media. And so the second section of the book is kind of focused in that arena. What's happening in our society, what's happening in our political sphere that could be re-traumatizing us as individuals. And then finally, the last section is Fly. And Fly is about trying to come through that somehow. For me, coming through that is about trying to find connection with people, connection with the earth, connection with other people who've suffered, and trying to see if maybe through that connection we can find some kind of salvation. So, without further ado, just a moment. There's a little ado. So for some of these, I'm going to provide a little context, but for some, I'm just going to read them and hope for the best. So the first poem is called Convalesce, and it was written. So I was like on my last year of my undergrad, and I felt like I had life all figured out. I knew where I was going, had a direction, I knew I was going to go to grad school and all this stuff, and then I got a pulmonary embolism and almost died. So this poem is sort of like coming back to reality after that event and trying to figure out what the hell just happened to me. All right, Convalesce. The last time I prayed to God, I lay dying in a mess of crisp white sheets. Days slid by and collided with one another in some back corner of my mind, where things go to wait for me to remember them, like detritus hanging in trees after a flood. And everything ached. Sunlight, needles, a scar on my knee from when I was 5, the prayer ached. I cobbled together some words in a line and pushed them out of my mouth. They resisted the way poems resist, clinging to my lips like trapeze artists. The prayer, what was it? Some request for life or death, some quiet apology for being, pre-recorded vestiges I had only to recite. I remembered a shrine I saw in a mid-city parking lot. Plastic flowers stood resolute in their pink, yellow, red vivaciousness as rain poured down. A picture of the Virgin Mary had been taped to the concrete base of a light pole, and there were beads, strings of beads that people pray with strewn about. How did those beads work? What was their magic? I coughed, and the prayer finally escaped. I watched it flutter around the room and throw itself against a window pane, and then it was gone. The air conditioning kicked on. The sheets laid against me like a child. My body chattered on and on about injury. This poem is staying together for the kids, which is always a great idea. Yeah. And how you kind of delude yourselves that they don't know what's going on. So this one's called Protected. We close the doors so we can fight. We yell in a whisper because in the next room, our children grow. We wouldn't want to damage them. Precious bright porcelain, soft velvet, sweet summer peaches. We worked so hard to craft this pretty life of rooms filled with matching curtains, rugs, bedspreads, warm hum of a refrigerator with always enough to eat, and it teeters on our shoulders, set against our necks like blocks of melting ice. Behind the door, cinched up in the walls, we are clumsy. We trip and tumble in the froth and tie accusations on one another, shove each other into corners, fall on each other. The space between us ignites, chases all the animals from the forest, but it's okay. We're quiet about it. We keep our children safe from ourselves. Okay. Angel is the next poem, and I'm just going to say shortly, it's about not fitting in. Angel. In this tar paper shack out on the edge of everything, I inspect the glut of my days for a memory I know is in there somewhere, a shimmering, singing pinch of a day that still wrestles me into joy. Loose of my moorings, I rummage around in an old current, some old wreck of an ocean for any sign of recognition. Had I come this way before, did the fidgety waves remember me? Lapping at my edges, they say I was a catawampus malcontent in my younger days, and they do not know what I did with my memory coin. They say, you were bent in all corners like a junkyard license plate. We tried to help. We tried to make you new again. The moon, swinging in his sky swing of lavender stars, laughed a full belly laugh that shook me through to my rivets and sticks. All they did was teach you about rust, he said. The angel tried to help. I remembered her then, that long-legged, wobbly angel whose eyes were too big for her face, heavy above her cheeks like stones sliding down a mountainside. When she blinked, little tufts of air fell on my arms. She climbed down out of the top bunk of space and slid into the bottom bunk with me. We put stickers of foxes and rabbits on the bottom of heaven. And after a while, she said she was supposed to help me fit into the picture frame I was born with. That picture frame. I'd carted it with me for years, placed it empty by every bed I had ever slept in, dusted it, held it, pressed my lips against it, thinking someday I would get in there, someday I would fit. The angel pushed and pulled and squeezed and pinched, trying to help me into the frame. She prayed and danced and asked God for some scissors. I stopped her there. I showed her some cactus needles in my palm and a pencil lead that had been stuck in my calf since 6th grade. They were reasons. She frowned. "You're never going to fit without the scissors," she said. It was a bright, true fact spinning on its axis between us. I think we may go a little past 8. I think we got a little bit of a late start, but I'm just going to press ahead. All right, this one's called Trauma. And then there's the morning you feel like you're missing something. The beat is there, but the breath swings shallow in the eaves, waiting for the next emergency. You check things, phone, fingers, rim of your coffee cup, but all is in order. The eyes observe the infallible rules of things. All things obey, conform. Only the mind, inhabited by some wild force, bucks at the notion this is real. This body, sitting, drinking, heaving thin cups of air at the room, claims no one is home within the shell. No marionette attends the strings. But a long ago, faraway version of self peers from a doorway flooded in light. This is a poem about living in the bad side of town. Break-in. And then there was the time the cops showed up at our door at 2 a.m. looking for Celestino, unfurling a warrant like a ramrod, commanding us to put our clothes on while they pushed into our shoebox in the sky, invading every little corner of our pathetic little lives. Dirty underwear on the floor, the cat box unscooped, empty bottles of wine like sentinels of our abuses. We didn't know Celestino. His face stared out from an old booking photo, brown eyes, dark hair, just like me. Where had he gone? What had we done? The cops wanted to know. Our cat hissed at them. My lover tried to make peace. Celestino, just some guy with a drug history, and us saying, we don't know him, we don't know him. Like we were swimming in waves so much bigger than ourselves. Our voices lost on the walls, my arms crossed over my chest. Yeah, we're still in the first section. Okay. Last one from the first section. Educated. I'm turning inside out so often I can't remember which is the way I ought to go. I leave post-it notes on lamp tables and windows telling myself, this is a real lamp table, this is a real window, but I'm not sure. A memory pastes itself to the walls, rolling glue over itself in long, dripping strokes. Strips of paint and glue coalesce like a reflection in a pond. I can see a time in a kitchen, in a house, years ago now, when our voices ran the rough gauntlets, scraping us hard against rocks, depositing us soft against shores, my cheek on the wet sand, your eyes carried downstream. The memory peels from the wall under its own wet weight, the heavy hulking glue, and underneath, glass. Okay, so moving into Fume, aptly titled Fume. All right, post-colonial. I'm in here and all of it is out there. It pushes against the windows wanting in, and I put my forehead to the glass wanting out. It tells me stories of things that have happened, the homeless camp that was forced to move, the woman in the woods who was beaten, the days and needles spent. I counter with the palms of my hands where there is nothing but need. The sky is blue that ravages us. The sunlight casts its arrows until we can think of little else. A mouse tunnels into the powder-fine drywall, scratches his way into the insulation, lines his nest with bits of plastic and shorn blanket threads and stray strands of my hair. Here I am, with my worry baked into fine tea biscuits. We say to one another, oh, that was years ago now. as if the ashes weren't still floating around us, marking the currents of our breaths. We move along streets, duck into doorways, shuffle through rooms ablaze with conversation plumes. And we drift among the tufts of fine fallen new snow like we aren't cold, like we don't remember whatever heat whipped us into ruin. Race. Hustled up to the starting gate, we glance at one another like, what the hell are we doing here? Our nostrils flare, our muscular haunches are prone to run, but we don't know why. We did what they said. We hustled ourselves around all the right bends, learned all the right commands, let them onto our backs, and tried so hard to be good. We snorted and whinnied. We wove our glorious intelligences into dust we could throw on top of serious questions and smother them, just like we've been taught. Weave just this way the answers to all, and so our hooves rake the dusty lanes. A crowd grinds to life in the stands, and we run. Okay, this one's called Runberg Ice Raid. You Austinites probably remember that event. Okay. Need water for this one. I'm in the same line as you at the grocery store. Like you, this is where I buy my bananas, chicken breasts, Band-Aids, toilet paper, cat food. This is where I grip the grocery cart and hope the person who used it before me didn't have the stomach flu. This is where I worry what I forgot. And should I get a loaf of bread, or do I have one at home already, and what's all this going to cost? I'm in here in the same line as you, plopping my treasures and burdens on the conveyor belt like they are going to be smelted into something beautiful. You place the divider between your things and my things. You don't talk to me or look at me when you do it, but we're together, listening to the rustle of items being bagged, to the pulsive, repetitive hum of, how are you today? Did you find everything you need? And to the insistent bleep, bleep, bleep. In here, we're all moving to the same tune. We all know the steps and how to move our arms and how to avoid one another's eyes. We're all here trying to get done, to get home to our little nests on the walls, to our people we love, to our papers and books and screens and windows and toilets and sinks and dishes and carpets and ceilings and doors we don't have to open and closets we can hide in and backyards we can run through should the need arise. This one is called Detained. When you're locked up, you try not to ask too many questions. There's a premium on them. The space they take up in your mouth, the itty-bittiest time you have to ask them. So you sew them together in a long blanket, a stitch here for when can I see my family, and a stitch there for how much is this going to hurt? And there are days when the blanket stretches to the sun, or it runs home to your house and knocks on the door, your lover's eyes, soft worry nests. If you could, you would burn the blanket like incense on an altar, or pull each thread to see how many prayers cling to it. Or maybe you would lie down on the petal ground and let the threads hold vigil over you. So this one is going to sound like it's about a birth certificate, but it actually is frustration with anything that is a piece of paper that defines who you are. I find that frustrating. So birth certificates, college degrees, my stupid driver's license, like the whole thing frustrates me. Because identity is so much more complicated than that. So this is kind of a poem of frustration about these issues. And it is called Legitimate. This is something, I suppose, holding my little piece of paper that legitimizes my window frame soul, all that pouring in of views and sounds and birds chirping, chipping, or chiming away like hollow metal tubes of tinkling sunlight. This paper grows limp in the humidity. I am because this is, and now I have a face and a name, and I get to walk around like a real soul. I get to be brown and baked in the sun like pottery, all mud and clay, all memories and ash, all children and mothers and fathers and lovers and caked moonlight. The paper says the day I was born. One day, one birth, one time among many that I opened my eyes. all brittle. The will you, won't you, in silence, is the will of you leashed to a lamp pole, dark street, yellow mid-city light going scattered in heat, even at night. The sidewalk under your shoes cracks itself with tree roots and runs out just when you need it, just when the blues become some kind of blood in you. Derelict beauty of a U-Town dream, clustered and flustered by U-Town fiends, runs and falls and skins a knee, and in the wound, diamonds. All right, so now we're into Fly, which is that yearning for connection section. Idealized. If I go dreamy in a thimble sailing on the open heart of this day, and maybe a jazz note or 10, and maybe the soft fuss of clouds or sheets or a lover's little touch, would you write letters back to the mainland with me? We could forget bombs swirling out over the Atlantic basin or icebergs leaping to their deaths because of whispers they heard about warm waters to the south. We could eat the snacks I brought and listen to our heartbeats and give everything a name the way everything names us and calls us brittle wince of light and ignores us. Could we find something in the snaps of sparks twirling up from our campfire on an island far away, waves away, scoops of lemony sun and shivering stars away that could save us? If we go dreamy, can we put the icebergs back? Crumbs. At first I was like, maybe I won't put this poem in the book, because it's a bit sweet, literally, but I just like it. I hope you like it too. I want to fall down into the belly of this poem with you. With our arms spread and backward falling, I want us sinking into the downy soft core of this poem. I want us nibbling at its crusty edge, discovering its burnt corner. I want our jaws stiff and painful from too much sweetness, our lips swollen from too much salt. In the belly of this poem, let's make a house of cinnamon sticks and toasted bread. Let's paint our walls with honey and stitch sprinkles into the ceiling, almost like stars, almost like constellations of wish confetti, almost like tiny bright ships sailing. The belly of this poem can hold us. Beyond the stiff throat tosses out frisbees of phonemes, and below the intestines sprawl in darkness. But here, in the belly of this poem, with our shimmery sugar crystal gardens, let's lie in the wheat with our fingers in the frosting. And the closing poem is a trip, so heads up. It's called Faith because for me the concept of faith is really complex and stuck in a whole bunch of other mired stuff. And so when I think about faith, all this stuff comes to my mind. And then, so this poem might not seem like it's about faith at all, but for me, it kind of is. It's something in the ending. It really is some answer to me about faith. And it's also a trip. So, a paper robot I was staying in a hotel with told me someone had abducted it and poked needles into its eyes. I tilted her face to the light and could clearly see needle holes in the paper of her eyes. But then the hotel staff told me something completely different, that the robot had been causing trouble, tipping things over and being rude to people, and I didn't know who to believe. I told the robot, look, I can't help you if you aren't honest with me. Then we had to run away, because someone was after her, the same person who'd poked her eyes with needles. So we got in a limo and drove away to some strange town with houses small and white, with tiny green yards, and then squirrels stole the robot's magic. I started chasing them to get the magic back. The magic was the end of a piece of silverware bent into a ring. As the squirrels made off with it, they jumped in the river. I jumped in after them, and we were floating down the river, the squirrels in front of me with the silverware magic ring held over their tiny little heads, until I finally got it from them and said, I really wish this could make me fly, because I'm desperate to fly. And then a giant bird swooped down and got me. Mike was my English teacher, so we can blame him. Just kidding. Anyway, my final big thank you to all of you. It's just, again, it's so overwhelming and surreal to see so many faces of people that I love, and so just really thanks so much for being here tonight.